Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, all of the onlookers watching this show and this program. And I'm Kundiling Rinpoche speaking. I'm sure friends and associates and colleagues do know who I am. But for the rest of those of you watching, just to introduce myself, my name is Kundiling Tulku, Kundiling Rinpoche, and I'm also called Sumati Gyana Lobsang Yeshi. And I would like to start by putting it this way. There's been a very long outstanding request on the part of a few friends and colleagues. And these friends and colleagues are venerable monks, geshis and lamas. And they work for a forum which is known as the Tibet Public Talk. The Tibet Public Show Talk. It's a sort of a reality show kind of thing, which occasionally makes video cuttings, sort of professional interviews with veteran Tibetans or followers and devotees or protagonists or experts, scholarly people, and also the ordinary lay and civilian who follow the Tibetan Buddhist Gelugpa deity, protector deity, Dorje Shugden. So this forum, I believe, has been established not very long back. It has been existing for the last 3 years, I believe, approximately, precisely 3 years, I suppose. And as I said, and I repeat once again, there's been a very long outstanding request on their part to say something about the belief and the practice, the concept or the theory or the idea behind protectors. Now, I started by doing something to please them or to be able to do something for them on their request, and I believe I had given a short talk on the basis of the very ideology or the practice of the belief of the concept or the theory of protector or Dharmapala. Today the request has been particularly in relation to how did this controversy start? What is it? What is it all about? What's behind the story? Why is it such a burning issue? Why does it carry on like this, even down until today? We are appropriately speaking, we are now in 2016. This is the third millennium. There are so many burning issues in this world with which we ought to be more concerned and focused on. There are so many things, problems, conundrums, imbroglios, that we should, as Buddhists and as people advocating peace, compassion, tranquility, we should be, really putting our attention into these kind of things. But here we find ourselves bogged down with a controversy which essentially, if you come to think of it, it really is sort of something that has little or no importance whatsoever because of the whole silliness or the whole stupidity behind the idea of creating a problem based on the issue of a deity controversy. If you really come to look at it, if you really investigate, you'll find that it's just an onion. It's just a Tibetan onion. You keep on peeling it. You keep on peeling it. Eventually, you discover that there's nothing, but you will have a lot of tears, The one who's going to relate it is the one who will be peeling it, and the one who will be listening to it will be too close in the proximity of that onion, and so both the speaker and the listener are going to have tears in their eyes and lots of time and effort wasted on peeling off this so-called controversy called the deity controversy, the deity issue. That's why I say it really is ridiculous when you come to think about issues and problems being faced in this world are much more serious and much more important than this in its magnanimity. But at the same time, if you're not going to carefully investigate and study, if you are not going to really deeply go behind the recesses or, the shades and the hues and all the barriers placed around this whole controversy and how it has been made to look like, if you're not going to take some of your time to investigate or at least go to the logistics or the rationale behind that, you're probably going to end up making a lot of judgments that are not going to be fair, and that are going to be very biased and unkind to a community or a gathering of people, or let us say a vast entourage or society or whatever you want to call it. It's going to be very biased and very discriminatory to a lot of people who actually believe and engage in this practice, and who have no such agendas, so to say, agenda in the sense of, backdoor policies, or, backbitings or backstabbings or conspiracies or intrigues or whatever anybody is going to call that. For example, Dorje Shugden followers and devotees are being blamed for all the kinds of things in this world for which they absolutely are not to be held responsible for. So before I actually have to talk about this, I have to tell you what they are being blamed for, what Dorje Shugden followers are actually being blamed for, or being made the what you call Satanists, or the evil doers, or the eye or the mother of all evil. I have to really say a few things about this very briefly. I'm not really going to go into such details, but I have to say something about it. Now, incidentally, if you are interested as to, or say, for example, if you would point blank ask me as to why did this controversy, or why was this whole issue raked up at all, from the very beginning? Has it been cooking up? Has it been cooking up since decades? Or did it begin and become a hot issue through the decades? Or was it something that started in March 1996? You might want to ask this question point blank. Let us put it in that way. You might have a question in which you might want to put it point blank like this. If you do not have a question, you might even, generally speaking, people innocently put it forward like, why was this issue even raked up in such a way? What was so bad about this practice, or why did Dorje Shugden become such an issue as such? To get the answer in completeness, it would be necessary for you to know something about the Tibetan exile government policies and the Tibetan refugee orientations, or their fears, apprehensions, doubts, suspicions, and superstitions. In short, what I'm saying is you have to understand the Tibetan mentality or the psyche. Tibetan mentality or the psyche. There is a saying in the Indian mythology, it is from the Panchatantra, the story of the rabbit who was sleeping under a fig tree and was dreaming that the sky was about to fall on his head. And around that time, suddenly a fig, actually, a fig fruit actually did fall. It was a fig or a walnut, but it was a fruit. It was a big, thick fruit, strong enough, that fell on his head, and it hurt him and it woke him up from his sleep. But because he was sleeping very deeply and dreaming about the sky falling in his head, as soon as this walnut or fig fell on his head and he woke up from his sleep, the impression was the sky actually did fall on his head. So he made a whole hue and cry and ruckus about the sky falling on his head, and he started running, warning everybody all around in the jungle, warning Brother Squirrel, Brother Fox, Brother Jackal, Brother Lion, Brother Tiger, Brother Leopard, Brother Mongrel, Brother Deer, Stag, etc., etc. Started raising a hue and cry and a hullabaloo about the sky falling on their head. Now all of these animals, all of them believed it, and they all started running behind him leading the crowd, and all the rest following him, and all of them saying the sky is going to fall on our head. Who said so? The mongrel said, the deer said the fox said the hedgehog said the porcupine, the leopard, the tiger, the bear, the swarm, and the birds said it was Brother Rabbit who said so. Eventually, as the whole forest was agog with this rumor and propaganda, and everybody was running one direction following the rabbit, not knowing where, suddenly the lion, the king of the jungle, who saw that, roared loudly and said, "Where are all of you idiots rushing to?" So everybody stopped at their place wherever they were and said, "Your Majesty, my lord, Your Majesty, that happens to be that the sky is about to fall on our head. You too run." And the Lion King, of course, said, "Where did you experience this, and who said so?" And so they went literally in the same sequence and manner, and it came up to the rabbit. And when the rabbit was asked as to where did he actually experience the sky falling on his head, he took the lion and all the forest animals to the spot in the area, and they discovered it was nothing but only a fig fruit. And so the king lion picked it up and he said, Is this the piece of the sky that fell on your heads? You idiots, now disperse, all of you." That was the end of the story. Now it so happens that we have this kind of a phenomena or problem in a closed society, like a Tibetan society that depends only on the rumor mill, the gossip grapevine, and a society where, there is a lot of culture and education and high standing, understanding and in-depth philosophy and the influence of Buddhism. At the same time, there is an utter dumbness or a kind of a tendency which seems like where Tibetans can easily be swayed by gossip and rumor, or if something or somebody tells them that something is bad or something is good, it happens like that. You probably have to picture Europe until the early 19th century or something like that. Now, if somebody raised a ruckus in the village and said, "This woman is a witch," now, a very intelligent woman, a very capable woman, now, she's much more witty than the rest of the men and even the church leaders. Church leaders are very angry. Yeah? The gospel and the evangelist, and the priesthood, they are very angry. The neighbors are very angry. The other silly and ignorant and stupid women, they are also very jealous. Now, how do they get at her? How do they do away with her? They just sufficiently create a rumor. She's a witch. And then a witch hunt will happen. And then whether she's innocent, whether she is or she is not a witch, will not be the issue. The leaders and the heads in the society will blame her, curse her, or will accuse her for being a witch, and that will be the end. So you have to imagine that kind of a scenario of Europe until the late mid-19th century, where hysteria was a very important factor or way of doing away with your enemies and your adversaries, and people just creating a rumor. The best rumor, as we know in Europe for hundreds of years, was just saying that they were Gnostics. She's a witch. They are Gnostics. She does pagan practice. He sold his soul to the devil. He's made a pact with the devil, and that would be the end of the person. In the same way, the Dorje Shugden issue has become the kind of what we also call the issue of the dead donkey made alive. Now, this is probably a Tibetan saying, making a dead donkey alive, or making a corpse rise up means fundamentally, essentially speaking, a corpse is a dead body of a person that's dead and gone. So if it's rising up, it's not really the person. It's an evil spirit or some disturbing, interfering, entity that enters the body. And that's how you get the so-called phenomena of the zombie. So raising a zombie is a Tibetan saying, which means a dead issue that has no consequence or relevance is raised up, a ruckus is made, and a hysteria is created, whereby the whole society, jumps on their feet, and you find them like in the story of the rabbit who dreamt and who actually imagined that the sky was falling on his head. And all the animals believed it and started running behind him until a lion came, the king of the jungle, a lion came and discovered that it was only a piece of rumor, a hysteria created out of untruths. Therefore, what I'm trying to tell you is, maybe my example has sort of been stretched out rather very long, but if you've understood what I'm trying to say to you, it's a rumor, it's an untruth, it is a dishonest, apocryphal story that has been invented, just as you do have apocryphal versions of the Bible, and you do have inventions or fabrications in the political scenario, in the religious scenario. All you have to do is look back into the Middle Ages and see what the Vatican did, what the Spanish Inquisition did, how did they fabricate and how did they create. And you've had thousands of years of ongoing persecution, killing and destruction and persecution of innocent people. And in fact, if we understand this history better, those innocent people had the true Christian spirits and were trying to be really genuine Christians, and their fault was that they were only trying to practice Christianity in the way they believed it to be so, and because they wanted to be really close to the gospel, and for this they were being punished, and for this they were being put to death, and there was a witch hunt against them. Now I would say the same thing is happening over here. Maybe many people here in the West and the Europe just do not know how to relate this history of 1,000 years of violence, persecution, killing, intrigues, conspiracy, especially those created in Christendom, but not by Christianity. We are by no way implying that this is Christianity. These are the people who decided to call themselves Christians. They were never the Christians, right? So the people who just decided that they were the genuine and the real Christians, and the rest of those who gave their own interpretations, and the ones who really wanted to go closer to the gospel and to the real life of Jesus, which is poverty, humility, and chastity, as Saint Benedict put it, that they wanted to go closer to that. They wanted to go to the proximity of that original message. They were condemned. They were killed. If you know that history, if you know that past, there is no difficulty in being able to relate to this in the way I'm going to introduce and put it forth to you. Otherwise, you will think I'm talking typical Tibetan stuff and Tibetan things and politics, which has no relevance to the issue of spirituality. Why am I even sitting here glued to the TV, watching this and listening to this guy called Kundalini Rinpoche, right? Mm-hmm. That's the first impression I want to clear up. So, just a few seconds ago or so, I was talking about how hysteria, public outcry, or condemnation, or suppression in the sense of persecution is doctored or tailored. You might call it doctored, tailored, whatever you want to call it. Or how false allegations or conspiracies or intrigues are sort of, plots are sort of generated tailored, doctored, made, fabricated in order to do away with adversaries. Now, when I'm saying that, you might think, what was so damning and what was so threatening? What was so possibly an issue related to Dorje Shugden, the deity, and Dorje Shugden, the practice? Was it a very celebrated practice? Was Dorje Shugden a very famous protector? Were the people practicing Dorje Shugden, the adherents or the protagonists or the advocates, were they very famous in history? Were they remarkable people? Were they outstanding and successful people in whatever profession they may have been, whether they were in the clergy or whether amongst the civilians? Were they really people to be reckoned with? If someone were to ask this question to me, to all that I would say, yes, it is so. And when I say it is so, I just want to add another Tibetan proverb here, a Tibetan proverb or a Tibetan watchword, which makes a lot of sense. You may not agree with me, but you have to take this into consideration. You have to give me the opportunity and the privilege to be able to explain, because this is what I'm doing here. The saying goes like, in Tibetan first, it is Nobu Rinpoche la da manga. Nobu Rinpoche la da manga necessarily means a precious gem has many enemies. Now, in the English equivalent or English transliteration, it doesn't make any sense to say that a precious gem has many enemies. Rather, you would say that if there is a precious gem like a diamond that is thrown across the street where 20 or 30 people are descending and walking or coming close to, you can imagine what's going to happen. All of the people coming from different directions are going to pounce and try to get their hands on the diamond, right? Now imagine just a pebble or a stone that has been, thrown across on the street by the same person. It's not a diamond, it's not a precious stone. And there are hundreds of people descending on that very area or place where the stone has been, thrown. Nobody is going to come, or nobody is sort of going to make a big ruckus or, crowd or a hullabaloo about trying to, retrieve that stone. Is anybody going to try to get that stone? Because it has no value. But if a diamond is cast in the middle of a marketplace, can you imagine how many people are going to jump and try to get at the diamond? In the same way, the Tibetan proverb implies to people of capacity and capabilities, so to say, and people of celebrity who have become celebrated not by any devious or mischievous or illegal or criminal means, but by virtue of their merit. Should they become famous, they are going to have detractors. They are going to have backbiters. They are going to have enemies. Now, if you think this is odd and this is strange, look at Buddha Shakyamuni. Our master, Buddha Shakyamuni, teacher of gods and men, as we say. What was his fault? But he had big and famous enemies. Most of the people don't read the story of Buddha Shakyamuni. They only hear Siddhartha and about him sitting under the Bodhi tree and getting enlightened all by himself, like having had an instant cappuccino, and then, coming to the conclusion that, all you do is just let your mind be itself, and that's how you become a Buddha. Now, such a kind of impression here amongst many people in the West with regards to the Buddha, that being there, how do they even ever know that Buddha had so many enemies in his life? Now we have a celebration which is called the Great Prayer Festival, Mon Lam Chemo in the Tibetan language. It begins on the first month of the first day of the Tibetan calendar. It's the new year. It begins with that. That is not a festivity or a celebration. That is a commemoration of Buddha's showing miracles at the age of 55. This was for the first time in his life that he answered his adversaries and his opponents by demonstrating his metaphysical supernormal powers and also debating with them. That is because these enemies of the Buddha pursued him for many years. Why did they pursue him? because he had so many capabilities, he had so many qualities that they did not have. That became a simple reason for them to be so jealous and so angry, because they were losing all their supporters and their admirers to him. So that's why they decided they would do away with him, or they would get at him. And that's why Buddha Shakyamuni had enemies. Now, if you do not understand this part, at least look at Christ. Why was he crucified? Was it any fault of his? When he said he was the King of Jews, did he mean to say that in the mundane or the worldly sense, or in the transcendental sense? But his detractors took it from there as a cue to destroy him by creating a hysteria amongst the Roman rulers and saying, here is an evil man who is declaring himself as the King of the Jews. We do not have any other king than the Roman emperor. He's a fraud, he's a liar, he's a conspirator, he's a troublemaker. And that's how, I'm sure you all of you know, that's how Jesus got crucified. Did he get crucified for doing something wrong? Even when the choice of who was to be crucified was made, it was Jesus who was chosen, and the criminal serial killer was let to go. This is how the world, and this is how a lot of sensible so-called intellectual people behave when it comes to that, In the same way, I'm putting it in the same sense, Dorje Shugden is not an ordinary protector in the least. He is called the extraordinary, the uncommon protector, and not only of the Gelugpa tradition, but in particular that of the Ganden oral transmission lineage. Some people tend to call it the Ganden closed lineage. And there are people who themselves do not even have, or even believe, or even accept anything called Ganden oral transmission, what you understand, or what most of you know as Ganden Nyenju, Ganden closed lineage. There are people who say there is no such thing called Ganden closed lineage. There is no such thing called the Ganden oral transmission, emanated scripture. These are all high imaginations. All you need is just to see the 18 works of Tsongkhapa. Now, this is just the same as what Vatican and a few of its, politically minded so-called Catholic leaders were also saying. If your Bible is not of Saint Luke or Matthew's or this or of that, and if it is something that the church does not agree with, yours is a false apokrypha. So this is how the church used to also condemn. As I said, it used to disqualify, and eventually it used to put them to the stake. The same is happening over here when Dorje Shugden is called a protector of the uncommon lineage, the Ganden oral transmission lineage. Dorje Shugden is an uncommon and an extraordinary protector. And the reason why I say uncommon and extraordinary protector is not just because I think it's so, but we have a very impressive list of great luminary, celebrated savants, so to say, adepts, so to say, the greatest in the history of Tibet, who have been following Dorje Shugden for more than 3 centuries or so. And they say so. Now, we don't have to go into the details of the names of all of these people, but the greatest of Gelugpa masters to have come in the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, so to say, is the great master Pabongka Dechen Nyingpo. That's a nickname, Dechen Nyingpo, the essence of bliss, because he used to be considered to be an emanation of Chakrasambhara Heruka. And Trijang Rinpoche, the foremost refuge Trijang Rinpoche, who was his heart son, and the heart sons of Trijang Rinpoche, the great Trijang Dorje Chang Vajradhara, that is Kyabje Song Rinpoche and Kyabje Zeme Rinpoche. Now these have been very outstanding scholarly adepts, siddhas, and great practitioners, and the highest celebrated Gelugpa lamas who have been saying so, and that's the reason why I'm saying. There's no other reason for me to say that. Now, therefore, as I was trying to explain that, this is one simple way of saying why Dorje Shugden has so many enemies. You have to necessarily be an enemy or an antagonist of the practice of Dorje Shugden and the deity Dorje Shugden to have to make such a hue and cry and hysteria or a scapegoat out of Dorje Shugden. I'm sure you would agree to that. You probably, if you understand, you would agree to that. Now, I would like to say what precisely are the issues being raised and what precisely is Dorje Shugden actually being blamed of, because, you know, we have to come to have an understanding of that. And to have an understanding of that and to go into the details of that itself, the issue, the crux of the issue, the nucleus or the heart behind the issue. So if you have to know that, I can simply say that there are so many things that have been hyped, hyped and fabricated and made as if now it is the gospel or authentic history of Tibet. So it is unbelievable in the sense then that how much of Apocrypha has been fabricated throughout these few years, merely a matter of a decade or so. How much of hyperbole and how much of fabricated history has been recreated and reinvented to make Dorje Shugden really look like the mother of all evil. So now let's get down to the basics of what Dorje Shugden is actually being blamed for. It's very simple. It's just only a few points, and it's not something that we've decided to sort of label it in that fashion. It's coming from the leadership of the Tibetans, the political and religious leadership of the Tibetans. It is coming from the Tibetan administration, which used to be called the Tibetan government in exile, but now calls itself the Tibetan administration. It's coming from them. It's coming from their leadership and the people within that who call themselves the prime minister or the ministers involved or the secretariat or even a private office of the Dalai Lama, etc., etc. So it's foremostly coming from there and from them, and it's coming from the advocates of their leadership and the antagonists that are there amongst the clerical communities, like the big monasteries of the Gelugpa, apparently the three great seats of certain scholars or abbots or presumed scholarly individuals who joined the chorus along with the Tibetan leadership in saying so. So now, what are they fundamentally saying altogether? Whether you put them individually or whether you put them together, what is the crux of the issue? What are they actually saying? Now, to know precisely what they are saying, you have to look back at 1996, during March the 6th and 7th, and just a week later about what has been said. That has fundamentally been made the ideological crux of the eye of the storm, called the controversy, the deity controversy, or the controversy of Dorje Shugden. That's what it is. So it began with that Dorje Shugden is an obstacle to the Tibetan cause. Number one, Dorje Shugden is obstacle to the Tibetan cause. Now for that, you have to be a little bit savvy in the sense of knowing something about the internal bickering and Tibetan politics of, the Tibetan diaspora. When I say Tibetan politics, I'm not at all referring to the Tibetan autonomous region where the majority of Tibetans actually, live. That's where the majority of the Tibetans live. And if you really want a referendum on this issue, or if you really want to know facts for what they are, you have to ask them. If Dorje Shugden is the obstacle to the Tibetan cause, and because the Tibetan leadership says so, was it really the case? Did you ever think like this? Or do you really think it this way? Or is it you think it now because the Tibetan leader, religious and political leader says so? Now, if facts come to fact, you will find out that it is a result, the acceptance is a result of superstitious fascist ideology, and simple blind faith of just depending on a hierarchy, a patriarchal hierarchy, which is so important in the Tibetan society. Sometimes you see streaks of that even within the Germans and the Italians. You know, the patriarchal figure, the padre, or the male, you know. So, and the streaks of fascism had touched Italy and Germany. Not that I'm saying that people now in Italy and Germany are to blame. We would say in the Buddhist sense, this is karma, you know. But it unfortunately seems to be a very prominent streak amongst the diasporan Tibetans. And that is a sign that there is no democracy there. Now let's come back to the point of the Tibetan cause, you know. What has the Tibetan cause been throughout the years? In the beginning, it was absolute independence and freedom for Tibet. Then suddenly it became genuine autonomy. Then suddenly it became a referendum. We have to decide. And then it became satyagraha, the Indian term for struggle, peaceful struggle. Then it became the middle path. And tomorrow, who knows what this Tibetan cause is going to translate and become into. It's going to get a new hue, new feather, new color. It's like a clown, you know, playing in a theater in Milan city, so to say, you know, coming with feathers, ostrich feathers in the back, suddenly coming with a clown costume, suddenly coming as the majesty, some suddenly coming as the queen, or suddenly coming as the person, the executioner with the guillotine. Anyway, to put it in that way, you know, the paradigm of the so-called Tibetan cause is like that. Now, I have to put some humor into this, otherwise I'm going to sound absolutely boring. So, for the sake of humor, I'm saying that this is what the Tibetan cause has been all the time. So, we, the advocates or the followers of Dorje Shugden, say, you know, which Tibetan cause are we an obstacle to? If you are referring to Tibetan freedom and Tibetan independence, the foremost fighters for Tibetan freedom and independence who gave their lives up were all fundamentally Dorje Shugden practitioners. They were fanatic about this idea, Tibetan freedom and independence. They were fanatic about this thing called the spiritual and political leadership of the Dalai Lama. Now, are you saying they are the obstacle? Are you saying they are the obstacle? No. This is not only odd, this is ridiculous. And this is really the lie of the century. Because all those who served the Tibetan leadership were around the Tibetan leader, were there from the very beginning, struggled, came into India, settled down, strived very hard, did whatever they had to, had a so-called guerrilla party and a guerrilla struggle, fighting on with the Chinese, even though it was a fight without a result. But they did it. And all these people were followers of Dorje Shugden. Now you suddenly come saying all these people are the enemy of the Tibetan cause. Which Tibetan cause are you referring to? If you're referring to Tibetan freedom and independence, Dorje Shugden followers did not give up Tibetan freedom and independence. In fact, they became very disappointed when the Tibetan leadership gave up the idea of Tibetan freedom and independence. Now that issue, for me as an Indian, is not an issue at all. You want freedom, you do not want freedom. I do not think that Tibetans could ever run the country, either in the past or even today. Where was there a municipality system? Where was there a public forum? Where was there a grievance or addressal of grievances? Where was there any human rights and freedom? If there was life, it was only for people like us. For people like us, cardinals and bishops and blue blood people like us. It was an aristocracy. It was a feudal society. So I'm saying this sounds preposterous. It's absolutely untrue. So if you're talking about genuine autonomy, what kind of a genuine autonomy can you speak of in Tibet, where the communists have already created a system which is better than what was there before 1959? Did the Tibetan people even have a sense of hygiene? Was there any sense of human rights or an identity? Was there a city municipality or a civic? Was there even a good toilet and a drainage system? That much we find in India, even 1,000 years back. This is a society that calls itself, the roof of the world, that was created by monks and lamas, apparently, so to say. It lost all aspects of a nationhood or a state. So where was there a function or a life where everybody in Tibet could have a decent livelihood? It wasn't there. It was only for the aristocracy and the clerics. So therefore, if you're talking about genuine autonomy now, you better talk about the economy. You better talk about the public civic municipality system. You better talk about voting rights and other kinds of things. Where is the blueprint and paper of what is your idea and how are you going to develop the economy? How are you going to deal with the tourism? How are you going to make a country and its capital a metropolitan and a cosmopolitan? Do you have any background or history or knowledge or civic understanding? You have only been a monk living in an ivory castle. How do you manage a country and run a country? You cannot even run a country now in Dharamsala. What are you talking about genuine autonomy now in Tibet? So we say, please, don't talk about this. Why should Dorje Shugden followers become an obstacle to genuine autonomy? Now, this referendum, what referendum? The unity and the peace of Tibetan society has been destroyed. A segregation has been made. I would like to talk about later because I don't want to emphasize on that now. And now the Tibetans are a divided community. Every Tibetan that meets each other, say for example, if I'm walking in the middle of Paris on the street, or even Amsterdam, the world's most open and free city, where if I want a dope, I just go to a coffee shop and get it. But if I am a Shugden follower and I walk into even one of the Tibet support group people who are there in 100, they are not even going to give me a glass of water. They are going to say, I've been sent by the Chinese here to poison their well, or perhaps, spread AIDS or some dangerous disease to them. So I will just be created like a, lecherous bum, and I will be told to go away from there. This is a fact and the truth. The fact that there are so many Tibetan Buddhist centers around here in the West and in Europe, and they outrageously put out these pamphlets and these flyers saying, Shugden followers not allowed. You are saying there is no segregation, there is no discrimination. It happened before the Second World War, but we the Allied forces, along with the Americans, we've done away with all this thing. We don't talk about this anymore. You may be saying so, but this is happening. This is happening, and you may be hearing about it, but a lot of you probably don't want to believe it, because probably you genuinely want to believe that the Papa in Dharamsala is speaking the truth. We say, please investigate. This is not the case. Now, coming back to the Tibetan cause. How do we harm the Tibetan cause? That's my question that I put squarely point blank to the so-called adversaries of Shugden, the antagonists, Shugden antagonists. How do you claim that we are the obstacle to the Tibetan cause? Secondly, they've been saying the practice of Shugden has become an obstacle to the life of the Dalai Lama. which means since 1996, if any Tibetan, so to say, or even a European who said, I am a follower of the Dalai Lama, then if he wouldn't be stopping with Dorje Shugden practice, then the quality of oxygen in Dharamsala or around the palace of His Holiness and the quality of oxygen for the Tibetan government in exile may probably have become acidic, or they probably would have experienced heart attacks, or they probably would have had leukemia or some kind of cancer, and they would all drop dead because we stubbornly persisted in our practice of Dorje Shugden. Now you can kindly tell me as to where in the world does even Satan worship or devil worship or any such worship, whether you call it Lucifer or even Lucifer's grandfather or even Satan's mother or even Satan's great-great-grandfather and their respective worships, has ever been dubbed as causing obstacle to the life of the popes in Vatican or the cardinals in the various Roman Catholic churches and the dioceses. Have you ever heard of such a thing like this? I think even in the medieval times that was not there. In the medieval times that was not there. If devil worshippers were to be burnt and put to the stake and killed, they were to be put to the stake and killed. But there were people and there were certain popes who themselves were interested in magic and occult. And in the secret archives of Vatican, we know that as a fact. You know, Copernicus saved his skin. Galileo got to go along with his theory as long as he accepted the basic dogmatic concept of the Catholic Church. We do know about this, and we do know as a fact that inside the secret archives of Vatican, you have the Torah, you have books on witchcraft, you have black magic. So I usually say, who the hell even in the Vatican has said that this constitutes a big obstacle to the life of all the Catholic leaderships and the popes, etc., etc. So none have said that. You better check on that. But unfortunately, His Holiness has said that. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, has said that, and it has been accepted as a gospel. Now, is this fair? If Shugden followers have been constituting a threat to his life, how does it happen to be so that he claims to be living until the age of 113? Now, just yesterday, his birthday had been celebrated. There must have been thousands of people who had assembled in his birthday and had given him a very long and a very majestic long life ceremony, puja as they call it, Tenshuk in Tibetan. Definitely he must have been very euphoric, and he must have said he is going to live for 213 years. There's a possibility. Maybe I'm exaggerating. There is a possibility. He must have said, I'm going to live for 213 years. Well, the fact is that he has said it now for the umpteenth time. He is going to live for 113 years. In the meanwhile, somewhere when he got irritated with somebody, he said, well, now my life has been subtracted by 13, so it's probably going to be 99. But he is 80 and he's going to live 99. People who practice Shugden have not stopped practicing it. And rather, due to this outcry and outrage, you find that the practitioners of Shugden have just grown like termites and ants. Now you see more pictures of Shugden, you see more statues of Shugden that even great masters in their lifetime, like Pabongka Rinpoche and Tejang Rinpoche, had not themselves seen it. So it's amazing what this controversy has created. It has just created an increase and doubled 3 times the ratio of the practitioners of Dorje Shugden. So how does that become or constitute a threat to the life of His Holiness when he's going to live for 113 years, and when in between he has also said now it's 99, but he still has 15 years or so to go. So how in the hell does Dorje Shugden Dorje Shugden followers constitute a threat to his life? Now there's been another angle given to this story by Dorje Shugden practitioners, and especially their protagonists and celebrated figures. They align with the Chinese communists, and the Chinese communists have given them an assignment, or what you call a mission called Destroy the Tibetan Leader. This is what they keep on saying. I don't want to talk about this now because I'm basically discussing the reasons. I'm outlining the reasons. Now, that was the second reason. For your clarity, I will repeat. First, the Dorje Shugden practice constitutes an obstacle to the Tibetan cause. Secondly, the Dorje Shugden practice becomes an obstacle to the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Now you contemplate and investigate on your own for the facts or the fabrication of these statements. Thirdly, Dorje Shugden and its worship constitutes sectarianism. It increases sectarianism in Tibetan society. Now, I'm going to simply say a few things very briefly by drawing outlines from the history, comparing it to the Middle Ages, and then coming to the present circumstances and situations. So to say, Dorje Shugden constitutes sectarianism, means bias. Now, if you're wondering what this all means, let me just give you a very short explanation of what the meaning of this so-called Dorje Shugden constituting sectarianism all means. It basically means that those who follow Dorje Shugden are very narrow-minded people. They are orthodoxical, conservative, fundamentalist Gelugpas. They are supposed to be the people who say that only the Gelugpa tradition is the best, and all other traditions and views are all rubbish or nonsense. They are the people who say Tsongkhapa is the best amongst the greatest of masters who ever came. All others are second class and second quality, so don't go shopping there. Don't even look at them. They are supposed to be people who don't even touch Nyingmapa texts or Kagyupa or Sakyapa and tell their students and their disciples very strongly, better not go there. Otherwise, there's a man riding on a lion with a strange dagger which looks Indonesian, and he has a heart in his hand, and that heart is going to be your heart if you go to the Nyingmapas, or even if you share a cup of tea, and that dagger is to rip you off from your belly or probably from your anus up to your head, and better not do that. That's what he is. Be careful. Beware, beware, beware. Now, that's the kind of impression being given about Dorje Shugden followers.